All right, y'all, today is the day. And by today, I mean a few days ago because I'm filming this after I already baked. Yeah. But alas, the excitement remains the same because here I am standing, literally knowing what the outcome was. But before we get into that, I guess I can pick back up from where I left off last time we talked. If you're lost, don't know what I'm talking about. And my last video was the first video of my sourdough series that I have started. So my first video is me making the starter. We came into some challenges. We left things very open-ended. We weren't sure what was gonna happen. It was a real big cliffhanger that you just missed out on. I'm joking. But anyway, if you want to keep up with the whole series, then feel free to check that video out first. But by all means, you don't need to watch it unless you want to. But like, maybe you will because you like me. Anyway, so just to get everyone caught up to speed from that point. So I did feed the starter after forgetting to feed it for its last. Where was I? I fed the starter, I let it sit on the countertop for probably a couple of hours just to, honestly, I'm not for what, I've just seen other people let it sit on the counter for a little bit before they put it back into the fridge, so that's what I did. I did put it into the fridge, and then on the day that I thought that I was going to make sourdough, I took it out and I think I fed it. See, this is why I should just film the whole thing because now I'm forgetting the timeline. Long story short, once I took it back out of the fridge, however many days later, nothing really happened. I'm pretty sure I did feed it and like nothing happened. It didn't grow. So I was like, okay, clearly there is a variable here that like either didn't exist or wasn't working correctly. And I do think part of it was that because it ended up in the back of the fridge, and my fridge I realized was actually like way colder than it needed to be. Not to mention that it has been quite cold in New York recently. So yeah, I'm not sure if that had anything to do with it, but alas, I was like, you know what? We're just gonna not start over because that would be silly. Like there's nothing wrong with it, you know? So I went to go refeed it. I put it into a brand new container. I ran out of rye flour, so I used just whole wheat flour, no all-purpose flour, just whole wheat flour, just warm water. And baby, she came back to life. So all is well, a little hiccup, not exactly sure what it was. Was it the rye flour? Was it the fridge? Was it forgetting to do that last feeding when I was getting the whole thing started? I'm not really sure. I don't know who's to say. My starter personally seems to react a lot better to just whole wheat flour than the rye flour, so that's how I will continue to feed it. I have also been playing around with different ratios of things, and I'm not going to get into that right now, but maybe I'll talk about that in another video in this series. So now fast forward to earlier this week when the starter was ready. It was time to make the dough. So this is where things get fun. So in following the attitude that I kind of had in the first video about making the starter, and just going into it, not blindly and not without a plan, but just not like pressuring myself to like find the most perfect method. I guess that's the way of putting it. I wanted to do the same thing with this first sourdough loaf that I was making. Like I didn't want to put a lot of pressure on myself. I wanted to be able to have fun with it. I wanted to be able to experiment. I wanted to just like keep things mellow, you know what I mean? So I thought there'd be no better way to do that than to just follow along with the Claire Saffit's recipe on YouTube for her sourdough, which isn't really so much a recipe as it is like the baker's percentages and following along with her methods of folding and timing. So that's essentially what I did. And I mean, you guys will see the results soon. But if you're not familiar with that video, I will of course link it in the description. But essentially like she just takes a whole bunch of leftover flours that she had, and according to the baker's percentages that she was following with flour, water, salt, and everything else, you know, she just did a random assortment of flour. There was no specific measurement for any individual thing, so that was vibing with me. Of course, I only used 2 flours. I just used all-purpose unbleached flour and whole wheat flour. I'm just gonna like do a voiceover of everything that I filmed when I made this a few days ago, but I'm gonna be referencing the notes that I made. I essentially just like wrote down the things that Claire did so I wouldn't forget, and I followed that. So getting started, as you can see, I already said this, but I did put my starter into a new container, something that was smaller, a little more just small, fridge friendly, and she did rise. She got gassy, she got stanky, and she was ready to go. I did do the float test just to check because I do believe it went a little bit over. I'm still working on like the timing, of course, of when the sourdough starter is at like its peak point. It was definitely like a little past that, but she barely passed the float test. My timer for lunch. If you hear any random oven noises in the background of this video, it's because it is my lunch break and I am making arguably one of the best frozen meals that Trader Joe's has. They have a lot of them, but if you haven't had the tikka masala Highly, highly recommend. Okay, so first thing I did, of course, was auto-lease the flour and the water. And so in Claire's video, she was working off of 1,000 grams of flour to make 2 loaves. I simply just don't need that much bread. I mean, like I do, but I just don't. So I cut all of her percentages in half. So I was working with 500 grams of flour. I did 250 grams of whole wheat flour, 250 grams of all-purpose flour. You get the gist. I think all in all, I ended up with 80% hydration. So to this, if you know, you know. So I did 375 grams of room temp water, mixed it with the flour, got them comfortable. They got to know each other. They had, you know, a cute little introduction, covered it up, let it sit for, I think in her video she said anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours, but given my time constraints of having to get to work and also the starter being a little past its prime, I think I just went for 30 minutes. So that's 75% hydration, and then to get to the 80%, I added an additional 25 grams of water once things were really mixed in, just to help it all come together. So after the 30 minutes of letting the flour and water auto-lease together, letting the dough become dough, I measured out 100 grams of a starter and began incorporating that into the dough, which was actually a lot easier than what I thought it was gonna be. I know some people can say it's like incredibly tough to like mix this more dry chunk of dough with a, you know, wet, in my case, cold thing of starter, and it really wasn't too bad. So then for 2% salt, I added 10 grams of salt into this. Again, just continued to pinch and fold and mix it together until it all became cohesive. So it's basically just folding the dough on itself over and over until it became smooth. So then now that the salt, the starter, the flour, the water were all mixed together, it was time for bulk fermentation. I'm not sure how much of, you know, this process I will show, because when it comes to the folds every hour, because I was using such a lightweight bowl, the dough kept just like picking up the bowl when I was trying to do the folds and it wouldn't stay. The camera angle just like wasn't good, you know? Like I accomplished what I had to accomplish, but I'm not sure what footage you'll be looking at as I talk over this. But I followed exactly what Claire did. So, you know, after mixing it all together, cover it, let it sit on the counter for an hour. After an hour, do a series of folds, let it sit for another hour, another series of folds, another hour, another series of folds. All in all, it was in the bulk fermentation phase for 4 hours, and including the initial round of folds with the salt and the starter, it was 4 of those in total, if that makes sense. So after that final hour of bulk fermentation, it was then time to pre-shape, and this is where in my mind I started to like get a little worried, because of my experience with high hydration doughs up until this point, they just like don't go well for me. This is where things start to go downhill. Like they're just too wet, they won't hold their rise, like they're just very airy, and it always turns out okay, but like not how it's supposed to, you know what I mean? So for pre-shaping, I just followed the same process that Claire did. So I flipped our little dough baby out onto a floured counter surface. I brought all of the edges, I don't know, it was a circle, all of the sides, the outer diameter, perimeter, into the middle, flipped it over and manipulated the dough around. I started to do it with the bench scraper, but I think there's too much flour on my surface, so I was just using my hands to manipulate the dough to kind of form a more tight ball. And then I covered it, let it sit for a few minutes just to relax, have a good time, little dough spa day, if you will. And then from there it was time to shape the dough for realsies. So I uncovered the dough, you know, flipped it back onto its top, flattened it out a little bit, folded in the sides and rolled it into a tight ball, which again, like was so satisfying to do for someone that has up until now like barely been able to like touch the dough without it just like sticking to everything and losing its shape and losing air. So this was like, oh, it was great. I could do it all day. So after shaping it, I put it into its floured little basket, and I don't have right now a really good means of covering dough to let it proof. So I had an old Ziploc bag, a clean Ziploc bag that I put around it, and then to like get it extra enclosed, I put it in a regular plastic bag, which I keep getting from the bodegas, and I don't know how the bodegas haven't outlawed plastic bags in New York, but everyone else has. I don't know how they're getting away with it, but I'm repurposing it, okay? I'm repurposing the plastic bags that they give me when I get my vegetarian vegan cheesesteaks because they're so good. Anyway, what am I talking about? So Claire recommended letting it sit on the countertop for 1 to 2 hours and then letting it do its thing, continuing to proof in the fridge overnight, which again for me was a struggle because like we just have no room. I had to like get rid of so many things, take out so many things. I know this is not your problem, but like I'm reliving the memories, and I just hope we have a bigger fridge when we move soon. So then it's the next morning. This is where things get fun because not only is it time to bake the bread, it's then time to eat the bread, but what I was super excited about was scoring the dough because again, if you're picking up on what I'm putting down about my experience with bread so far, scoring is just like impossible to do half the time. So I knew, like, I was so hopeful. The process had been so like seamless and good up until this point. So I took it out of the fridge, preheated the oven with the Dutch oven in it at 500 degrees. When it was good and ready to go, I flipped the dough out of the basket onto some parchment paper, was able to score it just like so easily. The way the blade just like glides through that dough, just, I can't explain it. It just felt so good to be able to do that and not have it just like deflate completely or just get like raggedy or something. I don't know. I was just so concerned with getting that first cut in to get it to like form the ear while it's cooking. I like didn't know what to do after that. I don't know. You just see so many like pretty artistic, aesthetic looking loaves of bread, and I knew that like I wasn't gonna be able to do that, but I was like, I can do a little something something. So I tried to do a little something something. It's nothing great, but it brought happiness to my little bread loving heart. Again, in terms of cooking times, I did it the way that Claire did it. So covered in the oven for 15 minutes to 20 minutes, I think she says, and then about 30 minutes uncovered. That's exactly what I did. Maybe it's not the best bread in the world. Maybe she doesn't look perfect. Maybe there is a better recipe I could have followed. I don't care. I made sourdough like as best as I could for the first time, and I'm just like still ecstatic about it. Like this is a new Sarah has been unlocked. Like I am a sourdough bitch now. That's just how it is. So obviously I didn't want to cut into her right away because she was hot, whatever. So I do think I filmed some of when I was cutting it. So I will throw it back to past Sarah for that commentary. All right, y'all, we're gonna make this quick because I gotta get to work. But if I don't eat some of this bread right now, I'm going to explode. I need to cut into it. I need to see the crumb. I need to eat it. I need to taste it. I need to put an unnecessary amount of butter on it. I've had a lot of coffee today. Let's cut this bread. So the camera died before I could like actually try it on camera, but of course I do still have it with me. It's been actually sitting behind me this entire time. As much as I like wanted to eat the whole loaf in one day, in one sitting, like we're trying to be healthy, you know? We've had the loaf for a couple of days. We have about half of it left. And I mean, just get a real look at that. Like what? I mean, other breads that I've made do turn out like very similar. When I say that like I failed at other breads, they always turn out pretty decently looking, but just like the process never feels right because it doesn't exactly go as I feel like it's supposed to do. Whereas opposed to this time, yes, it's turning out looking like doughs that I've made in the past, but like the process just felt so much better. It was so much easier. Yeah, I'm just like, it truly is so good. And the next time I go to make bread, which will probably be in a couple of days, I definitely want to play around with the ratios of whole wheat flour to all-purpose flour a little bit, you know, see how it tastes different, you know, with those different ratios. Because like I said, this is just 50-50. I love to see what happens. I think people say that when you do more just like all-purpose white flour, that's when you get kind of a larger crumb structure. So I think that would be fun to play around with. Also throw maybe some rye flour into an actual loaf at some point, some herbs. I don't know. I'm just like, I'm so ready to like keep going on this journey. So y'all are coming with me. So you better be ready too. You really can taste the difference too. Like for the past year, I've been making bread like not every week, but almost at least not, if not every other week. And you can taste like the tanginess, a little bit of sourness. And I don't know, it's just so satisfying. Though this isn't satisfying. I just took the butter out of the fridge, so it wasn't exactly spreadable, but it's still good. And I used some of the bread to make a grilled cheese last night, and oh boy, that was a damn good grilled cheese. There's an equal amount of like crunchy but soft and delicate, and obviously it just like tasted great with some provolone cheddar. And I think I put some tomato on there too. Like it was just so good. I could probably talk about bread all day, but I'm not sure y'all want to hear about that, so I should probably end the video here. As you can tell, I am super excited with how well this went, because how embarrassing would it have been if I, you know, named the last video Sourdough Diaries and then this was the last like installment of that series. So obviously that means there's gonna be more videos to come, whether that's trying different recipes, you know, more information about starter, maybe some like lessons I've learned along the way as I keep going. You know, those are things that I wanna share here, because I've also just like been referencing a lot of other videos recently in the past, especially about starters and like the ratios and stuff like that. So I'll link some of the videos I've been watching down below that have been super helpful for me, because maybe they'll be helpful for you, because obviously there are just like an abundance of sourdough and starter and bread related videos online. It's hard to like sift through them all sometimes and figure out what's like actually answering your questions. A lot of the ones that I found were like very helpful, so I would love to share those with you if I can. And with that being said as well, if you're someone who enjoys sourdough and you want to impart some wisdom onto me, I very much encourage you to do so down in the comments or in a direct message. You can find me on both TikTok and Instagram as Bake Shit Happen. Anyway, thank you for coming on this journey with me, but don't worry, it's not over. There will be more videos like this soon. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.